Jen comes back from the beyond, and we're glad to have her here. Mark Carney cleans up a few of Trudeau's messes, but there's a few more he could clean up. And speaking of a mess, America. This episode of the Line Podcast is brought to you by Universities Canada. Across Canada, university campuses are more than classrooms. They're community hubs. From gyms and pools to theaters, health clinics, and labs, campus spaces welcome everyone. Whether it's a hockey tournament, a daycare, or a summer camp, investing in campuses means investing in the communities we share. But years of underfunding have left a $17 billion maintenance backlog, with 1 in 3 campus infrastructure projects now critical or near critical. Campus infrastructure is community infrastructure. To keep building communities, the federal government must make campus infrastructure eligible in federal programs. To learn more, visit UnivCan.ca. So, Jen.
Yeah, hi.
How you doing?
Great. Everything's awesome.
So
no problems here. Everything's normal.
People who have read Jen's latest column know why I'm currently handling her like an unexploded munition. But we're going to talk about that in segment 3. So stick around. Well,
I'm going to prove that I haven't become a psychotic nutcase for the first 2 segments.
Yeah,
or at least not any more of a psychotic nutcase.
Well, I was going to say, we're going to grade that on a curve, but we are going to demonstrate that Jen is of sound mind and body. So first, though, let's talk sound minds. Logistics. I always forget to do this. What day is it? September 19th, 2025. It's the Line Podcast. So while you've been coming home, literally and spiritually, this week, we've been talking about it for a couple of weeks, but this is the week when Parliament actually came back. Mm-hmm. They're in the House. A nice moment, I thought. Pierre Poilievre going across the aisle to shake hands with Mark Carney and to thank him for the immediate calling of the election, the by-election that he ran in. So I thought that was gracious and decent of him. So that's good. And then I think this is the interesting thing this week. Do you fancy a trip to Europe?
Yes, I do.
Me too.
Okay.
So unfortunately, we've been beaten out. Diplomatic postings are being handed out right now.
And we didn't get the call? What are you
talking
talking
again.
About? My God. Don't these people know that the best way to get rid of us would be to give us a plump diplomatic posting? We'll never podcast again.
We keep bringing this up for a reason. The podcast will continue until the diplomatic postings arrive. No, but look, we've got David Lametti leaving the Prime Minister's office for New York. He's going to replace Bob Rae as UN ambassador. Chrystia Freeland, this is an interesting one. So I've talked to some liberals about this, and I've read the press release here. Chrystia Freeland is now a special envoy to the world for Ukraine.
Well, she was the minister of everything, so I guess she just needed to scale up.
I guess. She's out of cabinet effective immediately. I think her duties got absorbed by Dominic LeBlanc, who is the new minister of everything. LeBlanc, sorry, I always screw that up. And this isn't official yet, but we're hearing that Bill Blair, who is not in cabinet after the last election, will be heading to London to take over as a high commissioner. There may be more. Look, first of all, congratulations to everybody on the new gigs. But Jen, for me, you know what this jumped out as? This is making Trudeau people go away.
Yeah, absolutely. But making sure that the people who served loyally within the party don't feel at the same time aggrieved. These are plum assignments. These are good postings. It's a way of sort of clearing house, but nicely clearing house. Making sure that everybody, gets, what is it? What isn't there a phrase for when you get promoted to, it's not the Peter principle exactly, but when you want to make people from the old regime go away, but you don't want them to, steal the company money and damage the company computers on the way out, you give them kind of like a fake promotion.
Yeah, there is a phrase for it. And
there's a particular phrase for this. It's
the seasoned broadcaster I am. I cannot think of it.
Well,
but
or
I know
was
what
it?
you mean.
It's
when you promote someone into irrelevancy.
Yeah, or it's a castration by promotion, right? Like castration by elevation. Perhaps that's the Churchillian form here. So all of these people have been castrated by elevation, which seems appropriate in some cases. So Freeland's removement to her special envoy role. This should not shock anyone. I don't think there's anyone, even though she took him out, I don't think there's anyone who's more associated with Trudeau's era than Freeland.
Yep, I think that's correct.
Matt, I think that you have a personal congratulations for Minister Lametti, seeing as he was one of your favorite Trudeau era cabinet ministers. Was he not?
Well, the thing is about Lametti is that, I'll be honest, and like this is, I don't mean to be shirty. Like, this is me just telling the truth. I didn't think about Lametti much. Like, Lametti was not particularly high on my shit list. He wasn't absent, but he wasn't particularly high on it. But during the Public Order Emergency Commission, my buddy Chris Nardi at the Post, he was doing like daily coverage, and he kind of just developed like, I think he was just enjoying it. He would message me whenever me or my work during the convoy was mentioned in POEC. Mm-hmm. And it came up a couple of times. And one of them, I don't even remember what the issue was, but I had sent Lametti's office a media request trying to clarify something he had said. And Lametti in like the internal documents is like, well, Gurney's not going to care what I actually said. So, but like, all right, send it to him, but Gurney's not going to care. And what was funny about it was, when you went back, which I did, and I looked at what our coverage had been, I'd been completely fair. And like, I didn't see the POEC. Of course,
that's what you would say, Matt Gurney.
It was like Lametti. I don't remember the details, but he had been on some Sunday show or something, and he had said something, and the conservatives were like breaking his balls, or the public was, and there wasn't a transcript yet of what his statement actually was. So I basically emailed the office, and I'm like, "What is the minister's position on this?" And they told me, and in the line, we reported it accurately. I think we disagreed with it, but we reported it accurately.
So we didn't really care what it was. We just wanted to make sure we busted his balls for the correct statement.
It's important, though. We have to be accurate. It's the job. We don't have to agree with them, but we have to be fair.
I'm teasing you. Anyway, the other thing I think was probably worth noting was the fact that...
Anyway, enjoy New York, Dave. Yeah.
Enjoy New York. Yes, exactly. Not that we care. No, other one, Pierre Poilievre, he did an interview this week when I was away with CBC.
Oh, yeah.
And you know what? He did just fine. Yep. He did great. Yep. Gee, turns out that when Pierre does interviews with supposedly or perceived to be hostile outlets, he handles himself just fine. So good on him. I hope that we've all learned a lesson here.
But what it also shows, and this is something you and I had talked about a lot kind of in the run-up to the election, Poilievre is a more multifaceted, multi-talented guy than Pierre Poilievre has been acting like.
Yeah.
So, you and I, God help us, we've been doing this long enough that we remember him in his Skippy days as one of Harper's junior ministers, right? He got himself in hot water because he said some idiotic stuff, but also he was perfectly capable of doing the rubber chicken circuit or doing the gracious comments in Parliament. The kind of the aggressive Justin Trudeau has destroyed Canada version of Pierre Poilievre we've been seeing in recent years. I don't want to say it's artificial, but it is him being very narrowly invested in one asset of his character or one tool in the toolbox. This week, we've seen reasonable legislative proposals from the Conservatives. We've seen Pierre Poilievre shaking the Prime Minister's hand and thanking him for the swift by-election. We've seen the CBC interview, and yeah, you're right. I went and watched it. He did fine. The guy he's never going to be everybody's cup of tea, and I get that. But if we'd seen more of this guy before.
The other thing I would note is Carney's actually reasonably popular among many people who are not perhaps rabidly conservative, but are a little bit more in the mushy conservative space. So Carney's not screwing the pooch with those people. So
he's an upgrade over Trudeau in the eyes of a lot of conservatives.
He's absolutely an upgrade.
He's not our guy, but he's better than that other guy.
Well, I mean, we had Clark Reese in our a couple of weeks ago write about how he thinks Carney's doing fine. That effectively what the conservatives have is the conservatives of the country have a conservative prime minister who just happens to be wearing liberal clothing, which is delightful and ironic. But the end result is I don't know how much benefit Pierre gets from hammering on Carney or being personally shirty with the guy, right? Especially when a lot of people in his own base are basically like, yeah, he's all right.
They're going to, you know what? The short answer is they're going to have to figure that out. I don't think they know yet.
No.
So it's interesting because I did see the CBC interview Poilievre gave, but I also was just this morning, just out of, deeply ingrained self-loathing, I decided to take a peek at his Twitter feed. There's still a lot of the strident Poilievre.
But that's also
the liberals have destroyed Canada,
right? That's also targeted to the channel
and the
audience. I think that the channels are now so polarized that if you're talking to a Twitter audience, you know what audience you're talking to. You're talking to a fairly strident conservative base there when you're talking on Twitter. So you just have to know that and calculate and calibrate effectively. If you're talking on Blue Sky, that's a different audience. Now you're maybe aiming for people who are a bit more mushy. If you're a conservative person. If you're talking on CBC, you need to come across as a fairly decent, affable human being with strong opinions. But still sensible opinions. If you're talking on Rumble or you're giving an interview on Rumble, like the different Poilievre is going to come out. And I actually don't think that that's even insincere or wrong. I think it's very normal now for us to sort of segment a lot of aspects of our personality according to the audience that we're talking to. And I think it's especially important for a politician to know how to do that. There's a point at which it starts to become hypocritical and insincere.
Yeah.
But I don't think that Poilievre's hit that point. I think that this is just a guy who's got multiple facets to his personality, and he pulls on those. They're all some aspects of who he really is, but he pulls on the facets as needed according to the audience he's speaking to. In which case, he's a human being, basically.
Well, we can't have that.
We can't have that.
The other thing that came to mind this week, and it's worth spending a couple minutes on. Speaking of facets of personality. You talked about liberals I dislike, on my who was high on my Trudeau minister's shit list. You know who wasn't particularly high on my Trudeau minister's shit list? Freeland. I actually, she was annoying in some ways, but I think if people go back, and by the way, no one's actually going to do this, but in theory, if they were to go back and read what I've been saying about Freeland in recent years, rather than dislike, they would see frustration. And I've said of Freeland many, many times, I think she sees the big picture geopolitically exactly correctly.
Yeah.
I think she gets it in this exact same way I would say it, and I would phrase it differently than her. But I don't know if there's any daylight between Chrystia Freeland and Matt Gurney on sense of geopolitical direction of the world and what Canada has to do in response to that. How do we react to that? But I think the problem is, and this is something you and I were talking about recently in a different context, you owe it to yourself as a person, and your boss owes it to you, and your loved ones owe it to you. You have to put people in the position they can succeed in. Putting her in the position of a retail politician was dumb.
Absolutely.
She was bad at it.
Yep.
But you look at all of her previous career up until when she had to be hawking Trudeau's baubles, and then you look at what she's going to be able to do now, we might be about to see some of the best Chrystia Freeland we've ever seen.
I think it's totally possible.
Certainly in political life. So in terms of what she's actually said she's going to do, she's out of cabinet. She's going to sit out her term as MP. So there's not going to be a by-election. And she will not run again. So that's sort of her exit slope from political life. I don't know where her heart is. I don't know. Look, I don't know. She has an inner monologue, and I'm not privy to it. But assuming she still has the stomach for this fight, and I think she does, she could be really good at this. And she's now part of a government that will be, I hope, less terrible. The problem with the Trudeau government, you and I talk about this a lot of times, they would say a lot of the right things, and they would do sweet fuck all. If Carney, is even somewhat better at that, if he is somewhat better at getting our resource projects running, if he's somewhat better at meeting allied commitments, if he is somewhat better at Canadian Armed Forces rebuilding, then Freeland will be able to speak her truth in a government where it is slightly less ridiculous to do it. This could be a blessing for her. And this can sound very mushy. If she's happy, that's good. She's a fierce advocate for the people of Ukraine. We need them. We need people like that. This could be great.
Other thing I would note is that, of course, we are starting to see the clearing of the House.
Well, this is the clearing of the House.
This is the clearing of the House, no question. What we have yet to see, and again, I'm relaying some generalized gossip, is an influx of Carney people. Right now, I think there's still Tim Pitfield is still left in the Prime Minister's office. He's very much a holdover from Carney, from the Trudeau era.
Yep.
I think Hodgson is one of the ministers who was basically considered a Carney person who was brought in. Other than that, what we have not yet seen is Carney working aggressively to recruit staff and potential replacements to the cabinet that are cleansed of the taint of Trudeau. Yeah. So I think that what we're starting to see is definitely a government that is functioning more effectively, or at least appearing to function more effectively. But this is something that you and I have both noted, is that in order for that momentum to continue, Carney is going to have to tap people from his previous networks in government and business and bring them into this space to help redeem and fix some of these things. And so far, it's worth noting,
there's not a lot.
There's not a lot. There have not been a lot of Carney people being brought into and parachuted into this space so far. So look, we'll pay attention to it. It's worth paying attention to, but it's also worth noting that it hasn't happened yet. Last one I just wanted to note is rumors of a snap election. I believe the Star's Althea Raj made mention of this week, that there was some gossip going around that Carney was going to try and consolidate his situation by running a snap election maybe as soon as the spring. Now, for people wondering why in the world he's do that, remember, Carney's still technically in a minority parliament situation.
He's only, what was he, 7 short?
I'd have to double check what it was. I think I should know that offhand. Let
me use my
I think it's even fewer than that.
Machine.
So, with the NDP in disarray and undergoing their own leadership drama, the likelihood of him being able to pass a budget without any real concessions to the NDP or to the bloc are very high. However, it just adds a level of uncertainty to his ability to function effectively. And if he Carney maintains a fairly high standing in the polls, there's something to be argued for him just running a very quick snap election March 1st.
3 short.
He's 3 short. That's quite volatile, right? Because that means also only 3 Liberals need to rebel against him, and he's got a problem. 3 Liberals need to rebel, and then presumably he doesn't pick up any from the NDP or the bloc, kind of thing, right? Mm-hmm. Like in that kind of a scenario. So it's a pretty precarious parliament. If people see that he's made, after the first 100 days after September 1st, that he's made significant progress in a lot of files, people like the tone better, his approval ratings stay high, he might make the play for the extra 3 seats. Mm-hmm. So it's just something that we're starting to hear. The gossip is now starting to fly on this. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how functional. We'll see. I think that answer will be answered when we see how functional Parliament actually is.
I did see what Althea said, but I would also add to that my Liberal and Conservative sources have both told me that they're going to maintain high election readiness. And no one has told me in any condition of disclosure that there's a plan, but the Conservatives and the Liberals can both do the basic math. So for the Liberals, if they think they can get even a little bit of a bump, they're going to be incentivized to go. Meanwhile, the Conservatives need to be incentivized to defend against that at a moment's notice.
And the other thing, too, is if they can call a snap election, say, like in the middle of the NDP's leadership race, mm-hmm. leave the NDP totally defenseless and weak. I mean, that'd be ruthless, but funny. Like if the NDP had no leader and they had to run an election, like that would be just killer instinct. But they could pick up the extra 3 seats if the NDP collapsed totally.
Yeah, it's something to be ready for. Mike, this is one man's opinion, just one citizen, one voter. I hope they don't. I think Carney has right now everything he needs. The Conservatives are not able to force this government down. The Bloc is going to want to see what happens with the provincial election in Quebec coming up next year. The NDP, God bless them, bless their hearts. No further comment. So Carney has what he needs right now. I think it would be unhealthy for the country to do a snap election anytime in the near future, but it might well prove in the Liberals' direct interests. So yeah, I wouldn't rule it out.
Wouldn't rule it out, but we don't know for sure. On that note, do we want to put a pin in that and then come back to talk about what's going on in America? Or
almost, but let me just make one more point. It's just a follow-up to something you said.
Mm-hmm.
Talking about Carney people. I want to see what he does with the Senate. Like we haven't gotten there yet, but there's mandatory retirements that come up. God bless, God forbid, but illness or death could open up seats. People might resign for business or family reasons. I don't know what the current level is in the Senate, but it will be interesting to see when Carney starts making moves in the Senate, because Trudeau had set like a new trajectory there, right? He had said we're gonna change how it's done. Does Carney stick doing with that, or does Carney start grabbing business buddies and dropping them in and giving them portfolios? You can do that. Senators can be in cabinet, so that's one quick way of kind of. I don't want to say short-circuiting democracy because this is part of our democracy. But if Carney wants some Carney people in, appoint him to the Senate and give them jobs.
Yep,
you can absolutely do that. I don't know if he will. And I honestly do not at this time have the slightest sense of what Mark Carney's views of the Senate are and how he may wish to use it. That's an option. And I'm curious, because if I'm Carney, and clearly I'm not, but if I was, and I needed to actually, I've inherited half. Honestly, no, more than that. Like Carney's government now is more than half Justin Trudeau. Sean Fraser, bless his heart, is just pooping the bed repeatedly in recent weeks. Like he desperately needs to go spend more time with his family for everybody's sake. Mm-hmm. If you're Mark Carney and you're thinking, I got to get rid of this guy, drop a couple of business buddies into the Senate and give them jobs. That's one quick way of doing it.
Well, it also begs the question, why hasn't he done it? What's taken so long?
I think that's been my default question about Carney for the last almost 5 months, but
fair.
It's an option. And people would bitch and moan about it, but that's eternal, right? But like if you need to quickly populate a government with doers, you can do kind of the old. There's different ways of doing it, right? You can hire people to advisory positions and then give them an insane amount of power and basically say, even though you're not in parliament or in some form, you are being given my executive authority to act as czar of whatever, right? We hate that term, but like czar of this, czar of that. You can create czars. You can stuff the Senate, or you can send Bill Blair to London. You can have Chrystia Freeland eventually exit. She says she'll stick around at the end of her term, but we'll see. Maybe a couple of other of your ministers are underperforming and it's time for them to go serve their country as diplomats. You call a few by-elections, you dragoon some people. Some of the reporting I've been reading about this, though, Jen, you've probably read the same stuff. Carney's apparently having a hard time recruiting from the business world. Business world is not interested in this.
Well, the other interesting thing is, again, this is from reporting, and I can't speak from firsthand experience here, is that Carney is a bit micromanager is probably the wrong word, but he likes to be in control of his files. And from what I can see, he doesn't like to delegate, especially if he doesn't have a lot of faith in the competence of the people he's delegating to. And hey, who can blame him? The problem is that he's surrounded by not a lot of talent that he can reliably trust, which I suspect means that he's taking on way too much into his own personal orbit and not delegating appropriately. That's a problem that can only be fixed if he surrounds himself with people he trusts.
I actually see, I'd said a minute ago, I had one more point to make, but then you brought up something interesting. I'm saving this for a column. I'm going to write about it soon. But so Carney, smart guy. Like there are things Carney has genuine lived experience on. When it comes to networking with European allies, I think he's got the right stuff to do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to obviously fiscal and economic policy, he has a professional background in that. I'm going to trust him on that. I know this is a very Matt comment. You're going to have to indulge it for me. But Carney attempted to answer questions earlier this week about gun control. And it was the first file I saw him talking on where I thought, oh, he has no idea what he's talking about. It was clear that his briefing was incredibly superficial. He needs to find people he trusts to be his deputies on the files he don't know shit about.
Well, not that, but he doesn't care about the gun control file. Like, he doesn't give a shit.
Not.
Like, why would he, right? And also, I think it's unrealistic to expect even a prime minister to be extremely well briefed on every single possible thing.
100%.
That's not possible. We're running a massive country of 40 million people. Like, you're not going to be, well, yeah.
We are a country of 40 million people.
We are a country of 40 million people, but nobody is going to be briefed to the tits on absolutely every single file. It's not possible. There's too much, right?
To the tits.
But realistically, this is what it is. And part of his job is going to be surrounding himself with people who can fill the gaps that he can't or has no interest in filling. That's part of the job, man. So it's interesting. That's all. Anyway, I don't want to belabor the point. We do want to talk about America. Is there anything else, Matt?
No, but brief to the tits created a series of bizarre mental images that I'm going to need to spend some time working through.
Are we going to take a long break?
I think we might have to.
Very well. We'll come back. Until then, www.readtheline.ca. Like and subscribe.
For hundreds of communities across Canada, forestry is a lifeline, supporting 200,000 workers, $87 billion in annual revenues, and $37 billion in exports, $29 billion to the United States. But it's more than just a driver of our economy. It's key to addressing some of our biggest challenges. We need an action plan for our forest sector and its employees, one that will help build the homes we need with Canadian wood, reduce the risk of wildfires, and create more family-supporting jobs right here at home. To learn more about what forestry can do for Canada, visit forestryforthefuture.ca.
So, Matt, I got a very interesting question from a good and dear friend yesterday. She sent me an email, and she said, Jen, do all of the guys on the right know that they're doing exactly the same thing that the left was doing 5 years ago at the height of cancel culture shit? And do you know what my response to that was?
No,
of course they know.
Yeah, some of them definitely do. I think some of them.
This is revenge.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is.
This is just revenge. Of course they know. You know.
Yeah.
You know. They are self-consciously and gleefully taking from the left's playbook, amping it up, and also using the power of the state and the power of the U.S. administration to take it to the next step. And they're doing it in full justification, under the understanding that this is deserved and this is the comeuppance that all these people have earned.
Yeah. Well, it's obviously, just to ground this, we're talking about Charlie Kirk and the aftermath of his killing, which, by the way, that happened when you were in the States. What was that like? They don't care?
Yeah, no. I think definitely more of interest to the people I was with was the congressional hearings on UFOs.
UFOs. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So Charlie Kirk aftermath, kind of where we stand now. And Jen, like I was obviously taking this both barrels last week. A lot of people said stupid stuff. Then there's no denying that. A lot of people who should have known better were being shitty or gleeful about Kirk's assassination. That happened. I think, to your point about the left wing versus the right wing, a lot of my lefty friends have been saying to me, whoa, we should not be tarred with some idiot professor who tweeted something moronic. And I'm like, you remember a couple of years ago when I was writing some asshole with a Confederate flag at a rally does not tar everyone there? And like, whoa! Hey, so guess what? What went around is just come around.
Well, hey, remember when you basically regarded everyone who was to the right of, I don't know, some benign, like Matty Iglesias was basically a crypto fascist? Yeah. Tarring everybody with one, unnuanced label is really a problematic way of functioning in a liberal democracy, isn't it?
So here we are.
Here we are.
I do think, Jen, and I'm not denying the thrust of what you said, but I am going to add, I do think there are always people who get so drunk on their own righteous indignation that it overrides higher brain functions. Mm-hmm. So there probably are people out there in the States.
Because we are those people sometimes. Sometimes we get fully wrapped up.
It's not unheard of.
Those are my most popular columns when I just go tunnel vision and just lose the plot.
So I think that there are some people in the States right now who probably genuinely have and you know what? Not even the States. There's probably some people here too, because this is a trans-border issue. There are definitely some people who right now have absolutely no idea. They sound exactly like the most shrill, safe space cancel culture mob straight out of 2016. Mm-hmm. 100% there are people on the right now who don't realize it. But more to the point, more of them do. And
they know exactly what the fuck they're doing. Come on.
So you were out of the country when I wrote this last week, but I wrote that Mega is stage managing the aftermath of Kirk perfectly. Mm-hmm. Like, with the exception of Trump, who can't quite help himself because he's a narcissist, everyone else has stage managed this perfectly. And one of the things they are doing is they are taking the left-wing progressive cancel culture tactics and even scripts of a decade ago.
Same language. It's everything. It's identical. They're just flipping them.
And I've seen people on Twitter in righteous indignation, quote tweeting Republicans from 5 years ago standing up against cancel culture versus today, saying the person who tweeted this insensitive thing about Kirk should be fired and named and shamed, blah, blah, blah. God bless anyone who still thinks proving hypocrisy is a useful political tactic in 2025. Yeah.
Well, look, I don't want to fall into the Tukokay fallacy here. I think that what the right is doing is worse than what the left was doing 5 years ago at its peak. And the reason why I think and I'm using the term left and right very, very, very broadly, so please forgive me for generalizing, but I don't know how to talk about this without generalizing to some degree.
Yeah, it's impossible. We're talking about big groups of people.
We're talking about big groups of people. And I understand that the left is not monolithic. Neither is the right. Thanks for coming. But what I think is what the right is doing right now is much, much, much worse. Okay. And the reason why it's worse is because they're using the power of the state to actually crack down on people. We're talking about arrests. They're talking about, eliminating quote unquote suicidal ideologies. Some of these people, very clearly there is a conscious, knowing, organized effort to wrap people's emotions about the martyr Charlie Kirk up into a campaign to crack down on ideologies they have deemed to be offensive or inappropriate. Yeah. Just so that we're clear, so that everybody knows where I'm clear on this, I think it should be perfectly legal to mock the death or celebrate the death of another human. Yep. Sorry, I believe that's just what it is. I don't think that warrants arrest. I don't think that warrants any kind of punitive action by the state whatsoever. If your
employer might choose to fire
your employer may choose to fire you, that's fine. Yeah. That may be a choice your employer makes, but engaging in these sorts of mass bully, we're going to, stitch tag people on Twitter. I hated that when the left does it. I hate it when the right does it. And the other thing that I would point out, like your employer has a right to fire you. I also happen to think that there's an onus of decency, a standard of decency that differs depending on the kind of job that you have. If you're the president of like a major university in America, you're a leader. And maybe not a leader in the political sense, but you're a leader in the civic sense. And therefore the onus of decency.
And if you're a burger flipper, you're not.
And if you're a burger flipper, you're not.
Yeah.
I think it might be appropriate for, say, someone who's the president of a university to be fired for saying things in public that are horrific and inappropriate. I don't think it's appropriate to be going after the guy at Arby's for that shit. And some sensible guardrails are required here. Not that we'll get them.
The Arby's people have problems enough.
Yeah, well, there you go. Look, the people I'm pissed off about the most in all of this actually aren't the MAGA Republicans who are shamelessly and self-consciously using this opportunity to clamp down on the people they don't like. I think those people have been so far gone for so long. I'm not expecting some kind of standard of values out of those types. Like that was never my expectation. The people who are upsetting me the most in all of this are the people who claim to be classical liberals, who fought back against cancel culture when it was from the woke left, who said, look, we have some standards of decency and some standards of we have some cultural standards and norms around free speech here that shouldn't be undermined by the latest sort of ideological craze or fad. People should be able to make reasonable critiques about, trans issues or crime and order or, identitarian politics or intersectional ideology, that kind of thing. People should be able to make reasonable critiques of those things without fearing about backlash, without fearing that their jobs are going to get undermined or thrown apart. And I agreed with that, and I agreed with those people then. But some of those same people today are now suddenly all on board with this idea that we need to have a return to cultural decency, and we'd have a big crackdown. And it's not free speech, you see. No, it's not about free speech. No, it's because the speech that we're cracking down on, that's truly evil and vile and awful and horrific, where the speech that they wanted to crack down on, that was just the truth.
Yeah, their speech is dangerous.
Their speech is dangerous. Our speech is just the truth. And we're now we're now through the looking glass here, guys, because now all that we are litigating, once you get rid of the underlying standards for free speech, once you've abandoned those, now all you're left with is who gets to dictate what speech is acceptable. And who gets to dictate what speech is acceptable is then determined by who's got the most power, most cultural and literal state power at that particular moment. And this was why I was concerned when the left was doing it, because they were breaking down those guardrails. And like you and I both predicted 5 years ago, this is going to turn into a will to power conversation. Mm-hmm. And 5 years later, here's where we are, because the guardrails have been well and truly broken. And so now this new ascendant force is going to take this moment and use it to clamp down on the speech that they don't like. And then when their moment passes, the next people come in, they're going to clamp down even harder. So like we're in this collective action problem where each side is now reacting to the worst of the other side and amping up and degrading their own commitment to these fundamental liberal values more and more and more every time we get the pendulum swing back and forth. And the people who need to stand up to this are the people like you and me and the people who have made careers for themselves advocating for free speech 5 years ago. Sorry, that means you also need to take a shot at your friends when your friends decide to go off the bloody rails. These are the roles that we fundamentally serve in a civic society. And I've been most disappointed by the people, but not by the people who are tribally committed to coming down on the left or the right. Those people are tribally committed. They're gone to the fringes. They're lost to me. The people I would appeal to in this podcast are the sensible centrists who actually do believe that free speech is a value worth championing. And if you actually believe that free speech is a value worth championing, please explain to me how you get to the point where you're justifying seriously talking about building databases or arresting people for celebrating a man's death. I'm not saying celebrating a man's death is a good, decent, moral, human thing to do. You don't see me doing it, okay? I would like to know how you justify the idea that the state should be involved with that, when we're not talking about people literally advocating for imminent violence. Like, I understand that there's a slight nuance to even that conversation, because if someone is now on Twitter saying, I'm going to go kill someone, X person at 3:00 by the flagpoles, that's no longer a free speech issue. That's a threat issue, and that needs to be
kill
regarded.
All the gays, kill the Jews. Yeah, I agree.
We're there is a line between free speech and actually advocating violence, incitement of violence here, and even that line's a little bit gray sometimes. So I'm saying, look, if someone's actively inciting violence, that might be a different conversation. But the bar for incitement to violence is and must necessarily be extremely high. It's not, ha ha ha, Charlie Kirk got shot, he deserved it. It's not anything Jimmy Kimmel's bloody well said on his late night show. So I don't know, guys. Like, I this is a plea to my fellow sanies out there. Step back. It's
You're
time
gonna find
to, like,
there's not that many. Like, this is one of the things, Jen, and I countersign everything you just said. I'm with you all the way. But one of the things astonishing to me in recent years is how many of the conservatives I knew are actually just reactionaries. And they're not driven by a coherent ideological philosophy. They're driven by whatever those liberal cucks just did. And they're going to react to it. And then when they get the chance, they're going to do it right back to them, good and hard.
And then worse. So
that's where we live now. And you talk about Kimmel. We're talking about late night TV too much on the line. Like, this is like right after the Colbert stuff, just a couple of months ago. We wrote about it this summer because there wasn't a fuck of a lot else happening. But one of the things I just find interesting. So I saw the announcement, Kimmel being pulled off the air, indefinite hiatus, blah, blah, blah. And I thought to myself, oh, what did he say? Because I'll be honest here. Here's a little free speech myself. I think Kimmel's talentless and boring.
Well, that's another conversation.
I've paid zero attention to him. I have no inherent sympathy or like for Jimmy Kimmel. To the extent I've seen him, he's garbage.
This might be the most interesting thing he's actually said in 20 years.
Yeah. The guy is trash. Not necessarily personally. I don't know anything about his personal life, but I have no interest or esteem in his career. So when I heard he was being canceled, my immediate assumption was, oh, wow, he might have said something really stupid. And I began reading articles about it to figure out what he said. It took me like 7 articles to figure out what he said, because mainstream news sources are reporting Jimmy Kimmel to be taken off the air after comments about Charlie Kirk.
It was basically he said that MAGA killed Charlie Kirk. That was
that they were exploiting it. Like, he basically said that MAGA's exploiting it, and I went, "That's correct."
But no, the implication of his statement was that someone that Charlie Kirk was taken out by a MAGA person who wanted to give MAGA basically. The implication was that he was taken out by a MAGA person. It
wasn't anything about Kirk. It wasn't that he deserved it or that it was good.
Yeah.
And, I've been spending the last couple of days having learned people explain to me, no, it's about the markets and the private sector and Kimmel.
The affiliates were going to have a revolt. And I'm like, come on, guys.
If they were, that's fine. But then the FCC chair didn't need to say shit.
Yeah, it's just consequence culture, everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Just consequence culture for daring to make an off-color joke, slightly off-color joke.
You've done a good job drawing the philosophical architecture around this. I'm going to just tell you in 30 seconds how I'm approaching this, and it's not philosophical, it's pragmatic.
Mm-hmm.
If you are not morally and intellectually consistent, I don't give a shit what you feel or have to say. If you didn't care when those Democrats were taken out in Minnesota, but all of a sudden you're on a first name basis with Charlie Kirk, I don't care what you think about Kirk. And it's not about whataboutism. It's about your personal credibility in my eyes. If you were outraged when a guy like Charlie Kirk had high security costs to go speak on campus, but you're going to try and explain to me with a straight face that this is not FCC interfering in the free market. Trump spending the last 2 days talking about we got to shut down networks that are unfair to me. If you are not equally pissed off about these things, I don't care what you think. Like, and I'm not even going to argue with you. I might actually agree with you on a coin toss basis. I'm going to agree with you half the time. But if you are not intellectually and morally and philosophically consistent on this stuff, you're just not worth listening to, because you are a hack. And your opinions on any given issue will change based on not the facts, but the people involved. And I find that boring. I find it unhelpful. I find it uninteresting. There we go.
I'm not sure there's even anything more to say about it, but I think what's disappointing me about all this, and I will say there have been exceptions to this. There have been sort of classically liberal institutions that have managed to maintain their cool. Personally, I find the martyrdom of Charlie Kirk to be egregiously creepy. That's not to say that I wish the guy ill. I don't, or I didn't have any thoughts about him at all. It's beyond horrific that what happened to him. It's beyond horrific that America has moved to a place where any kind of speech dispute has escalated to the point of violence at all. And by the way, I do give the left some blame for that. Like, look, if you're going to regard speech as violence,
guess what?
Some people are going to take you seriously. And I think that there's a moment of reflection that is not going to come here. I know, but I just go back to the phrase in all of this that, but also at the same time, conservatives getting emotionally wrapped up in this man's assassination and taking it as far as like hearing phrases to the effect of, this is our George Floyd, this is civil war, or like this is proof that the left is, the woke are going to come kill us kind of thing. Like, this was an assassination by probably an unwell individual in an increasingly violent and unstable country. And it's not good. It's not going anyplace great. I think there's some blame to go around about how we got here. But Chris Selly's statement that I'm going to add to is very relevant here. But liberals are the sort of people who are adamantly convinced that they are not doing exactly the things that they're doing right now.
But they would never do the thing they're currently doing.
They would never do the thing that they are currently doing. And conservatives are the kind of people who will absolutely do the thing that they think the liberals are doing. So if progressives are very assured that they are on the side of history and that they would never do anything that is offside of that path toward a more beautiful, unified, utopian universe, even as the tactics that they're engaging with are fundamentally undermining any hope of that better future. Conservatives are the first to read into their tactics as opposed to their aims, and then take those tactics and say, well, they did that, so I'm going to do that plus 10, because that's justified. Mm-hmm. And that's how we have societies fall apart. That's how we have civic institutions collapse upon themselves. That's how we lose.
That's how Kirk gets shot.
That's how Kirk gets shot. But not only is that how Kirk gets shot, but that's also how Kirk gets shot, and the U.S. administration in a country ostensibly devoted to freedom of speech starts arresting people who have the wrong ideologies. And that to me is, and again, don't mean to undermine the death of Kirk. It's a very sad event. But what the U.S. administration is looking to do in response to that is radically more dangerous and radically more harmful to the body politic than the death of one man.
I will give you this parting thought, and we'll put a pin in this one. Talk about how it's creepy. I have people I know who 2 weeks ago, if I'd said Kirk to them, they would have thought I meant Captain James T. Now, in fairness, for me, that was a pretty good guess. But who had only the vaguest notion of who Kirk was, what Turning Point USA was. He was the dude who dunks on liberals on campus. Like, that's like I think I saw like a TikTok of him or something like that. Like, that was their level. And they're talking to me these days about Charlie. Okay. Nothing to worry about.
Everything's going great. Anyway, let's avoid doing this in Canada. Let's continue to let's all just.
We don't need to do it in Canada. We'll just do what the Americans do.
Let's just watch America from afar. Let's just all calm down. Let's chill out. Let's rebuild some civic connections, man. Like, let's volunteer a little more. Let's be happier people and let America do its thing. I don't want to follow down this path. I would like us left and right to all step back a little bit from the brink.
You know what I think we should do? Just go to the Mandarin.
Yeah.
Dinner.
Let's all go to the Mandarin together. Everybody likes the Mandarin. Let's run a movie, like.
March break. Not too soon to start thinking about that resort.
Yeah, absolutely.
Go grab a bit of Mexican beach and a drink with an umbrella in it.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyway, I struggle with this. I want to write a column about this, but at the same time, I recognize that I'm not coming from a place of moral authority because, of course, I'm a Canadian. I'm just some chick in Canada, man. Like, what does anybody care?
Yeah, I care.
You care.
I do.
Care. On that note, like and subscribe, and then we're going to talk about my adventures in alien land.
This episode of the Line Podcast is also brought to you by the Daily Bread Food Bank. Imagine choosing between food, rent, or medicine. For the 1.5 million Canadians with disabilities living in poverty, that is the daily reality. The Canada Disability Benefit was created to help, but at less than $7 a day, it isn't enough. Daily Bread Food Bank and coalition partners are urging government to fully fund the benefit. Visit fundthebenefit.ca to take action. Together, we can ensure every Canadian with a disability has the dignity of food and security. So this is going to be like speed dating podcast because you and I both unusually recording this on a Friday afternoon. We've both got to pick our kids up at unusual time. So we have 14 minutes to do this. Jen,
to be honest with you, I think that the time constraint will probably serve both of our interests here. Yeah. It'll probably help.
So if you have not read Jen's, I don't even want to call it a column. Her article is probably the only best way to describe this on Friday. This next segment is not going to make a ton of sense. Jen, in 1 minute, explain to me what the Monroe Institute is and what you were doing there.
Yeah, the Monroe Institute is essentially like a consciousness expansion organization that has been affiliated with U.S. Psychic spy programs, U.S. military psychic spy programs between the 70s and the 90s. Affiliated not in the sense that members of the military all went there to get trained necessarily, but there's a lot of overlap between what they did and people who went through various psychic spy kind of remote viewing programs in the U.S. military. So what they do now is they run a series of programs for people who want to experience some of their essentially training modules. So you can learn a little bit about remote viewing. Mostly what the introductory course entails is several hours per day of listening to what are called hemisync tapes, which are kind of quasi-hypnosis tapes that use something called binaural beats, which is where different frequencies are pumped into each ear in order to create altered states of consciousness.
You can find these on
online.
YouTube Music, Spotify, Apple.
They're all over the place. Go look up binaural beats, and there's tons of these on meditation lists and all the rest.
When I was going to Europe and back in the summer, I don't sleep well on planes. I downloaded in advance 10 hours of binaural beats and put my headphones on, and they help. They help block out the engine noise and the cabin noise. So you, and this is something you and I have talked about off the air, and the listeners and the viewers should know that what you experience, and I've meditated before, I have some very limited experience with this stuff. Your subconscious will tell you things that you need to know. And this is an experience I have had myself where I was upset about something or I was stuck on something. And with the help of like a guided meditation, information bubbles up into your consciousness and it can help set you free. But the problem is it's not the kind of thing you normally want to talk about on a podcast with 30,000 strangers.
Sure.
It's deeply,
unless you're me.
Well, even you should.
Yeah.
You don't have to tell us all that you were experiencing here. But one of the questions I'd ask you, and I got your permission to ask this. When I had an experience once, I was much younger and it was not nearly as profound as you are, but something was upsetting me. I couldn't figure out why. And with the help of a guided hypnosis, I found out why. I never in a billion waking hours would have made that mental connection. The thing that was bothering me was so stupid and minor and from years before, but over the years it had compounded, it had snowballed, and it was starting to piss me off. When you were going through this journey of yours, were you learning surprising things about yourself? Were you just, was it like, wow, I had no idea? Or did it all kind of fit when you're like, oh yeah, okay, that checks out?
I would say there were no surprises, but there were many, many revelations. That's what I would say is, there were some things, definitely some personal subconscious content that I needed to process and work through. And some of that stuff was not stuff I was willing to share in the article. I did share about how I saw an angel. So, look, you got your money's worth on this. All right. But actually people's reaction to that's been really interesting to me. But look, yes, I went through a very personal subconscious process. It was a very emotional and intense process. I was going through hours of these tapes per day, one after the other, day after day after day, and the tapes got progressively more intensive. So as you got to deeper and deeper states of meditation or hypnosis or whatever you want to call it, the experiences grew increasingly intense. Definitely had experiences where I was flying through cities or flying over forests and waterfalls and things like that. And that was in what I would call kind of a waking dream state. I had a very vivid visual experience, which doesn't surprise me. I know I have a pretty decent visual imagination. And I would say a lot of these experiences were kind of co-created. So your subconscious is doing something, but it's using the visual and informational data that your conscious can put into it in order to co-create these kinds of experiences for you. So fascinating to examine. I'm sure there's a lot more science behind it, which I didn't even get into. Was there stuff that was surprising? No, but revelatory and confirming, yes, I would say. I mean, I'll give you one example of the thing that I don't mind sharing, because this tends to happen when you're dealing with subconscious content. There was one exercise that we went through that was like, see a box in front of you in this state, and then pull out things in the box that you no longer need. So, and it's not, you aren't to put stuff in the box, you're to be surprised by what gets in the box and gets pulled out for you. So one of the things that I get pulled out in the box was a rotten steak, like a big tomahawk steak. And the way that I interpreted that was like your emotional stake in other people's outcomes. You have to get rid of that. So that's an example of how the subconscious kind of communicates with the conscious mind using wordplay, imagery, experience, emotion to try and communicate sort of the things that you're holding on to that you may not be aware that you're holding on to. Other kinds of content around like just, what I'm doing here, like what's my purpose here? Those got fleshed out for me in really useful ways. They wouldn't shock you. I shared with them before we recorded. I shared a little bit with Matt, and he started laughing, which I thought was a pretty good sign. So I would say very, very useful. I got a lot of really good feedback, and I got into the flow state quite quickly, but also of high intensity. Like it was emotionally intense. It was physically draining, exhausting. It was mentally draining and exhausting. I was in a lot of physical pain. Was one thing I don't think was got on. Like you're in this tiny little, blackened unit in a relatively small bed. And when I got into these sorts of visionary states, my body got really clamped up, like clenched up like that. And I was in these states for like 40 minutes at a time. And by the end of the week, I was like, I'm still stiff. Like I'm still in pain. It hurts. So it's if several hours a day of intense introspective meditation sounds like your jam, highly recommend.
Okay, we're tight on time, but I have two questions for you, and I want to ask you about two different groups of people. Without violating anyone's privacy, who goes to these things? You went, and you've explained this in your column, and I'm not going to reveal anything you've told me privately, but you went out of a mixture of professional interest and a desire for personal growth. You and I are both shockingly easing into middle age. You look back at your life and there's things you're happy with and things you're not. Your professional curiosity and I think your desire to grow led you to this place. Is that typical of the mix of people who are there? Who goes to these things?
I think a lot of people consciously or otherwise go to something like this when they're in periods of transition and crisis. A real mixed collection of people. A lot of them, for example, were starting to drift away from atheistic materialism as their guiding ideological framework. And I think that there is a lot of reasons for that. Some of it was consciously acknowledged and some of it was unconsciously acknowledged. That was a very, very common one. There was a lot of people who said, 2 years ago, I was an atheist. And then I started to look into this and I started to look into that. And I started to look into some of the emerging research around consciousness. And, I was starting to think that there might be more to this than I had previously been assured about, or I'm more uncertain than I used to be. So we're going to see what happens. There was a lot of that. Some people were just full blown into consciousness expansion because they've attached it to a kind of a UFO mythology. Lots of people were there, were super into UFOs, but I was told that may or may not be typical for some people. As I was leaving the Monroe Institute, a person named Daniel Sheehan showed up. I didn't know this person, but apparently he's very famous in ufology circles in the United States for being one of the major lawyers who's pushing disclosure of more UFO documents.
And we got some the week you were there.
And we got some the week there. People were very excited about that. And then there were also just people who were like, I'm in a transition with my career. I'm in a transition in my personal life. Lots of that going on. I don't know what to do next. I need some insight into what I'm doing here. Things of that nature. Very, there was one woman very tragically who had lost her son about a couple of months before she came to the Monroe Institute. She wanted to try and gain contact with him. And fascinatingly, she didn't. So very human, very, as I said, it's easy to go out there and be like, oh, lunatics, UFOs, tarot cards, all that kind of stuff. Like that's easy, smug dismissal. But when you looked into and talked to people, what you found were human beings engaged in a very human process of self-discovery, trying to answer hard questions for themselves. and not just taking the easy answers that they were given, but were trying to sort through their own belief systems and their own structures on their own terms. And I think that's a very admirable and very human motivation. And I couldn't go write that experience and be shitty and cynical about it, because the people were very human to me.
Not something we would normally talk about in the podcast, but just worth mentioning. I'm not an atheist. Like, you've been the one who's been more in recent years, has been sort of going through a journey of figuring out her spiritual beliefs. I believe in God. Always have. I believe in a generically Christian God. I'm not so much into organized religion because I don't do well on teams, but I believe in God. Always have. And I also believe in the weird. And I know that might offend some people who take their spirituality very seriously, but I've had experiences in my life that I cannot explain rationally. I just don't obsess about them. I just kind of go, oh, okay, interesting.
Yeah.
The world is full of things we do not yet understand and comprehend. And I guess today I brushed up against some of that stuff. So I viewed your article as an editor. I wanted to make sure it was in a professional form. I looked at it as your friend. I wanted to make sure you weren't revealing things you might regret. So we had some conversations about what to disclose, what not to disclose. But I also, just as a business guy, and the line is my business, I was genuinely curious what kind of a reception we were going to get here.
Yeah.
And one of the things
it's really different from the stuff we normally do.
Yeah. And one of the things I said to Jen was that if you drop this into the Globe and Mail or the Toronto Star or whatever, people would be like, what the fuck is this? But I told Jen, I think at the line, we've done a pretty good job cultivating an audience that indulges us when we indulge ourselves. And there is a personal, I think, affection and loyalty between us and some of our readers. So I told her, I think this is the right place to do something like this. I think you'll get some leeway here. We've only got a couple minutes left. What is the reaction you've been? Anyone can go read the comments under the article.
Sure.
What have you been hearing privately? I'm going to bet people are more interested in this than they might admit.
Absolutely. And I think that I've received some really interesting comments, particularly the private ones are fascinating to me. I mean, this sort of thing is, the piece like this is a mirror, right?
Yeah.
People are going to read it and how they're going to respond to it is very much a reflection of their own subconscious and conscious content going in. So there's going to be a lot of people who are just like, cool, this is out there. This is neat, fun. Jen Gerson went a little crazy. Isn't that funny? Like, fair enough. There have been a couple of people who've been quite nasty. Not very many. Not very many. A couple people. But I'm like, if a story about me running off to go do some crazy thing and seeing an angel is something that brings out a darkness in you, I can only have sympathy for that, because honestly, I think that you got something going on. There are people who reacted to it and instantly went, reply guy, I'm a materialist atheist and you're wrong, and my materialism atheism is the correct way of understanding these experiences. And my position on that is that's a valid interpretation. Yeah. Yeah. I leave the ending very open to people's interpretation. I'm not here to dictate one framework or another framework to people. If you want to understand what happened to me in my experience, and I was very candid about the physiological and psychological effects that this had on me, I went crazy. It was fun. But if you want to, I was getting
some great texts from Jen that week. I'm tripping balls.
I'm tripping balls.
I am drifting through space, and I'm just like,
yeah,
haha, have fun, thumbs up emoji.
Yeah, exactly, right. But if you want to understand that through a purely materialistic framework, I got psychologically head fucked. Cool. Like, I'm not telling you what's real, man. That's what suits you. And if you want to look at this, I've also had some interesting responses from people who are very sincerely religious, who have given me I'm going to need to sit with this. Jesus loves you, and please be well. So I've gotten very much a range of feedback. All of it's been fascinating because all of it's told me a lot about where people actually are at on some of this stuff. And I think there's a real smorgasbord. Let's just put it that way.
We'll wrap it here because we have to. But I was telling you before we started recording that many, many years ago, I had a friend who was full-blown Jesuit, like worked for Jesuit order, was doing the Lord's work as he saw fit. And I had some absolutely fascinating conversations with him over the year where he basically said, as a Jesuit doing the Lord's work, He goes, 90% of what we deal with, we have to just dismiss as material realm. He goes, this person is not having visions. They're schizophrenic. And our job is to support the family to get this person psychiatric care. This person is not possessed. They're insane. This person needs to be incarcerated. We need to call the police on this person. But there always were those edge cases where this guy, relentlessly educated, incredibly intelligent and worldly, was like, this might be the divine. And we have to take that seriously. So there are a lot of people out there who are going to come at this with different perspectives, Jen. I think this is going to be an interesting piece because I think this is going to be a piece people are clicking on for the next 10 years because they're going to Google this stuff and they're going to see you.
Or they're going to Google my name and be like, is Jen Gerson crazy? Look, I mean, that's a very Jesuit thing to say. My position on this is that I'm not so sure that the line between genuine divine and insanity is a black and white conversation. I think that there's a whole lot of gray in between those spaces. And, if you're reading this article and you're just like, oh, Jen's clearly had a psychotic break, I have to sort of just shrug my hand and say, oh, so be it. I have to radically accept myself even if I'm insane. So, I guess that's all there is to it, and we'll move on.
You know what else you need to do?
What?
You got to go pick up your kids.
Got to go pick up my kids. So on that note, you should like and subscribe. Go check out the piece if it seems like it's up your alley. And if not, I'll be writing about cancel culture this week.
I told Jen before we published, your next column is going to be something like Danielle Smith makes strange proposal. And people are going to be scrolling through your archive. It's going to be like, Carney budget has problems. I went to space with aliens. Danielle Smith referendum proposal needs work. Like, it's going to be a weird thing to be scrolling through. But anyway, readtheline.ca, like and subscribe. We will be back with another episode of On the Line on Tuesday. Have a great weekend.